So I am Laura Jackson. I work at CWJ Strategies and am fortunate to also work with Kelly and with Mark and the advocacy team with our East Texas Coalition. So I'm glad to be here to help facilitate this conversation. And I do also want to echo what Mark said earlier about all of our conversations leading up to today and the focus from all of these gentlemen on the good of the community and just hearing all of the things that they have done on our behalf from their positions of authority and of power. So thank you all very much for all that you have done and continue to do on behalf of our communities. We appreciate it. So I'm going to just start right now and ask you, Judge Stout, you've talked a lot sort of about the tools that you all have used and the prosperity that you've been able to create in Gregg County. I know that there have been some great wins and some great successes. Can you tell us a little bit about how you all have accomplished this over the last several years?
Well, am I on? Yes, I am. Okay. Well, number one, working together. I think the cities and the counties working together, you can always make a project come in a lot less or under budget if you're all working together versus a city going out and doing it and we not helping, or we going out to do a project that maybe the city could help. That's one way. Another way is creating the net RMA that was created some time ago in conjunction with Smith County, in fact, in Tyler. We created that net RMA to help to facilitate transportation projects within this community, and I think we've done two or three like that is big money. I mean, you get $500 $1 million allocated to be able to do projects instead of coming out of the people's pocket here, and trying to be aggressive in recruiting new companies and jobs to this community. It takes all of us as cities and a county to recruit businesses. Navy Gap and Dollar General and Orgill and Kilgore and a number of big distribution plants did not come here just because. We met with the leadership. We convinced they could see the passion in terms of we're business friendly. We want to do what we can to encourage them to come here. It's a great place to live, great place to raise a family, great place to go to school. It's a great place to retire from. So we've tried to put that image out as a group, and it seems to be working pretty well. But the problem that I talked about when I first got up here was about that SB2 and SB2 and HB3. The days of giving carte blanche tax rebates or tax abatements to companies to come to this town is no longer going to happen the way we used to do it. We cannot do it. We cannot give away future earnings that we will need in cities and counties to operate and provide the services that we have to provide to the community that you ask for, you request, and you deserve. So that's going to be a big change going forward. There's already been one change that we've had to deal with that and not giving the 100% tax abatements in doing that. And that's going to be a new way of doing things. And we might not be able to recruit those businesses because we can't give away as much as we used to give away.
Sure, yeah, I appreciate that. So, gentlemen, Judge Stout's mentioned several tools that have been used in the past, and can you all talk a little bit, and maybe how those tools are going away? Can you all talk about it a little bit from the city's perspective and how you've experienced that over the last few years or anticipate experiencing that? Rollin, you want to start?
So I'll start a little bit. So this is a really easy poll. I think I can get everybody to participate. If you like taxes, raise your hand. And so I think it's real important to notice, but the taxes are actually what provide the services that the people up here provide to you day in and day out. And so the one thing we don't talk about, and there's lots of talk about property tax, and there's been lots of talk about property tax, and there's current legislation passing where the state legislature is buying down school property taxes and basically limiting city property taxes. They're buying down the school taxes, but they're limiting city taxes.
And the county.
And the county as well. Oh, I won't forget you, Judge. And
just saying.
It's an interesting thing, but do you know where they got the surplus that they currently have? They got it from you in this room right here. So for the city of Longview, We make up, our budget is about $90 million for things that are funded with taxes. And I'm not going to talk about the $0.25 for property sales tax relief that we submitted to create the drainage division. I'm not going to talk about the $0.25 that we committed to Longview Economic Development. So we use 1 penny of the 8.25-cent sales tax. We use 1 penny, which is $30 million. That's roughly $1.5 million more than the property taxes that are paid in this community. So if you think about that, we send 6.25% of the sales tax in our community to the state. So they get $190 million. And speaking from the city of Longview's perspective, we get $30 million of that. And the other revenue that we have is property taxes. Well, they're not using any of that extra sales tax that we've sent, which is over 6 times the amount of sales tax we send back to Austin. They're not using that to relieve property taxes at the municipal level. They're using it as a one-time fix to do it at the school level, and they're not doing it for the counties. And so we're becoming more dependent on sales tax, which that's fine. We understand that. But the thing I will tell you is if you're running a successful utility like a water system, you want to make sure what you get every year doesn't change. You want that to be the majority of your revenue so that if you have volatility within the economy, you don't have to, you have a little bit of a cushion. Actually, our sales tax revenue is $2.5 million more than our property tax revenues this year. And they're talking about restricting the property tax revenue even further from what happened. And so COVID threw a lot of things out. There was additional money pumped into the local economies, good or bad. The reality is you probably haven't noticed the impact because it's kind of been covered up in this volatility realm. But what the judge is saying is exactly correct. The strains on the municipal services and the county services, it's coming.
So, Josh, I know that you mentioned some other issues that have kind of come up recently in the previous sessions. Can you talk to that?
You know, I thought it was recently because you remember the pain as if it was yesterday, but the one I'm going to talk about actually started in 2015. So everything Roland talked about is true. You know, some consistency in your core revenues so that you can plan around it. But beyond that, one of the important things from a city perspective is understanding who we're going to be. And by that, I mean what we have to serve, what we're going to look like. And so when we talk local control, that sometimes gets a negative connotation in lots of things. We're always the bad guy. I mean, every one of us up here, we're the bad guy. We get kicked out of legislators' offices. They don't want to see us. They kick elected officials out based on their stance on individual pieces of legislation and won't let them participate in any other part of the process. So when we're talking to you, we're not trying to overplay or exaggerate. Literally, the city of, I think it was Jacksonville, it was their city manager, the legislator thought it was their mayor, got kicked out either way. The question that got him kicked out was, what's your stance on SB2, HB3? And when he said, of course, we're against it, he said, well, then you can leave. That was 4 years ago. But let's go back a little bit further than that. 2015, prior to 2015, the cities had the ability to basically force annexation. And that sounds bad. If you're a developer, this was a great time for you. If you were a city or a county, this was a really bad time for you. So cities used to be able to plan for their growth. We used to be able to say, hey, see that big pasture out there? They're eventually going to be city residents. We've built our water system to accommodate them, our wastewater system to accommodate them. Our roads are going to look like this when it becomes a subdivision or when it becomes whatever it becomes. Well, in 2015, they got it right, almost. In 2015, I don't know if any of y'all remember this, but they said, look, the little towns, rural Texas isn't the same as the big cities. And so they passed this ban on annexation. Cities could no longer force other small communities and subdivisions, new growth to come into them. But they did it for communities that were 500,000 and larger, right? Fantastic. Back then, rural Texas mattered because we were conservative. We weren't the bad guys like Austin and Houston was. Well, a bunch of us up here on the stage decried, though, this is a slippery slope. You've just started the snowball rolling, and we know what's going to happen. And sure enough, we called it. 2017, quietly, literally in the night, comes through an amendment to another bill that removes the bracketing, and now every city in Texas lost annexation. That may not seem like a lot for you, but we have millions of dollars that you paid for. If you're in city limits, whether it's your business or your home, millions of dollars of infrastructure that you have paid for to support these future subdivisions, this future growth. Listen, if you live just outside of Longview city limits, this might be a harsh truth for you, or just outside of White Oak, or just outside of Gladewater, just outside of Kilgore, but you live in a subdivision, you didn't move there to live in the country. Okay, I drew the short straw. I have to have the hardest message here. You live just on the outside of city limits to enjoy the benefits of living in a community without having to pay for it and without having to build to those standards. Okay, that's a harsh reality. It's tough for me to deliver. Everybody's like, oh, how's he going to say it? Be careful, Josh. But it's true. We still have to serve you. You're still working in our community. It's when you have an accident at the intersection in town, it's still our police force that's coming. It's still the EMS from Champion that we contract with that's coming to help you out. It's our firefighters. It's our streets workers that build the streets that get you to your job. It's our parks that you're taking your kids to play because, no offense, Judge, but the county doesn't have a whole bunch of parks like what we have, right? And so... But there's more. Guess who gets to serve you now on a tax base that wasn't intended to serve you? It's the judge. So it took revenue out of our pocket that was designed. We as cities have different abilities. We have different tools in the toolbox to serve you as a more urbanized development, right? The judge and his staff, they're set up to serve you as a very rural setup, right? Farm to market roads, county roads, things like that. And so it just put a burden on him having to serve now a residential subdivision that counties just aren't designed to serve as well. And the city's lost the ability to control their growth. It's another one of those tools that just went missing. Now we figured out how to, Roland and I talked about this, we figured out kind of how to duct tape over it. We're using a different tool to fit that need, but it's just another example of what's happened.
All right, thank you. So I know that we have somebody up here who has a lot of experience with fire, and Josh briefly mentioned EMS and police and other emergency services. Can you speak specifically to maybe some of your experiences in the fire department and now as city manager and how this discussion impacts that?
Okay, yeah. In 2019, I became fire chief of White Oak Fire Department. One paid position, that's the fire chief. Everybody else is a volunteer member, roughly about 20 of them. So 2 years later, in 21, fire department was needing some equipment, one of them being a fire truck. The last time the city bought one, 25, 26 years ago, is still being used today, but fixing it, the parts are becoming obsolete. So we had to come up with a way to either buy a new fire truck or look at something used, but we all know if you get something used, you're getting somebody else's problem. So I had to come in and basically beg to get a fire truck, which I thought I was going to have to do, but when I presented it to the city, at that time it was Charlie Smith, city council, they were all for it. What do you need? And so basically we were able to get a brand new engine at that time, roughly $650,000. But now, today, $300,000 more for that fire truck. And it's 3 to 5 years out to get it. And what Judge was saying earlier about counties having to shut the door, volunteer fire departments are doing the same thing because they rely on funds through donations. That's where they get most of their money. White Oak gets their funding from the city, but they also get theirs for fundraising stuff. Nowadays, with things on the rise, that money going to the fire department for fundraisers and stuff, it's very little compared to what it used to be in the past. And so the city of White Oak contributes a little bit to the fire department, but we are struggling just to, keep the doors open. And with things, on the rise on cost, these smaller departments are struggling these days.
Right. So I'm going to maybe paraphrase what you said. Expenses are going up and revenue is not.
Yeah, correct. I mean, that
I think
revenue is
everybody can
basically
see that
staying the
graph
same.
and where we're headed. All right. Thank you. So, Charlie, I know that you had some partnerships that y'all have worked on in the past, and talk about that a little bit and how you see that changing.
All right. Jimmy alluded to the fact that I had spent some time with White Oak. I retired in June after 24 years with the city of White Oak, and I stayed retired for 10 days and went to GLADEWATER. I don't know, that might have been 9 days too long, I don't know. But anyways, so that's my history with White Oak, and I got to work with Jimmy in the purchase of that fire truck and stuff, and certainly understand where he's coming from with that. One of the things over my tenure with the city of White Oak was working with the county, and they've always been great to work with cities within our county. So, you know, our guys would come out, we might have to furnish the product as far as an overlay or something, and the county would pitch in, and they'd come in, bring their team in and bring the equipment in, because they had the equipment that we couldn't afford to go in and do an overlay or something on our streets. They're always so willing to do that, and with these Senate Bill 2 and House Bill 3, with these cuts that's come in, it's affected not only us, but the county and the cooperation. I know the judge would do anything in the world for the cities in this county. His hands are just as tied as anybody else's because of the money that's not coming in anymore, and that's going to continue. We're going to be facing that for years down the road, as far as not getting that revenue coming in that we had been used to. And the cooperation between the cities, you know, our fire departments, for one, we help each other. Longview's been to White Oak many times when I was over there. Same thing with Clarksville City and the city of GLADEWATER and White Oak. So those are things that when you take away from GLADEWATER because of the money that's not there any longer, I may not be able to send my guys over to help Jimmy if he needs something. Same thing that the judge is experiencing with his crews and our commissioners out there. They number one, they don't have the manpower anymore because it's so hard to hire people. That's just another part of the whole picture, I guess. But Austin is limiting us so bad on the funds that we have to serve you when you flush your toilet or turn on your water, and you don't have that because we don't have the help with infrastructure and stuff that we used to have.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm going to be honest. I don't know how many of you in this room are the same way I do. People start talking about roads and wastewater and infrastructure, and it just starts sounding like Charlie Brown's mom. But, you know, when it doesn't sound like Charlie Brown's mom is when I take my car in to get the alignment checked, and I end up having to pay a big bill because the streets have potholes in them. And so we really appreciate all that y'all have done through these partnerships and to serve us in our communities. And so just thank you for that. Our next question, I think if this room is representative at all of the folks who came on the East Texas Coalition trip, then listen up, because this was the number one issue we heard. Workforce shortage. Anybody in here dealing with a workforce challenge, workforce shortage? I mean, all right, I didn't get as many hands as I thought. I'm just a little disappointed, but I'm guessing y'all are the lucky ones. There is a lot of workforce challenges that folks across East Texas are experiencing. And so, Judge, if you could, does this discussion have any relationship to what business owners might be facing with that challenge?
Shortage in the workforce?
Yes, sir.
Well, I can tell you right now from the county's perspective, and I think the sheriff, I saw him somewhere in there, he can probably tell you more about it, but right now we're down around 34 short in the sheriff's department and in the jail, which oversees a daily population around 550 inmates. And we're having to bring people, management people and law officers off the street so we can manage the jail. That's a big issue, and we're getting in law enforcement now. It's not like it used to be. Things have changed. The career of being in law enforcement is not something that everybody's standing in line wanting to do anymore. and we're having to raise salaries, and we're having to try and get to be more competitive with the bigger cities, even though we really don't have the same comparison that Dallas or Houston do. Longview's doing the same thing. The city of Longview, they're short peace officers for the same reason. But I think you can go anywhere around this town right now, and there's help wanted just about in any kind of industry around here. Help wanted. And they're not even specifying what you do and don't do. We just need help. You just come apply, and we'll see if we can figure out where to put you. We just need a body. And I don't know if
Only
that's...
warm bodies need apply?
Yeah. And let me first say, I don't want this to sound like this is a complaint session from elected officials and city managers. It's not. It's what we chose to do and what we have in our careers. What we're trying to bring to everybody's attention is that Austin is starting to get into the business of managing local communities, local cities, local counties. And it's really putting a burden on the rural areas, the rural parts of Texas. Dallas, Houston, Austin, El Paso, those guys probably don't miss a lick because they're so big. Smaller communities in rural Texas, everybody's taking a hit. But yes.
Yeah. Well, and I'm guessing that the economic development tools that you talked about earlier as well, that's going to play into it as well.
We had to make a hard decision. It was the first one out of the bat this year. Skeeter Boats in Kilgore. Been around Kilgore for 35 years, Josh. Great company, great employment, going to expand here. And we could not give them 100% tax abatements for 10 years because we cannot afford to give away future earnings that we will receive as a county government to give them away or abate them. We cannot do that any longer. We're going to have to look at being smarter and being less competitive because we maybe have to do 5 years at 100% versus 10 years at 100%. And we don't do tax abatements anymore. We do 381 agreements. So the value comes by on the tax roll immediately. You don't have to wait till the abatement's over with. I know some of you all don't understand how that all works, but it all affects how we receive funding in terms of our ad valorem and sales.
So earlier, Judge Stout mentioned a meeting, maybe even right in this room, and talking about the future whenever this was, 4 or 5 years ago. Yep. Can you talk a little bit about that, Josh? I think you said you were here. So what was that meeting like, and how do we find ourselves in relation to it now?
Sure. So this SB 2, HB 3 that the judge has been talking about, and we're all really talking about, when it came out, it felt a little bit benign. It looked like it was just a change in one number. It took us from being able to get 8% growth down to 3% growth each year. But it did a bunch more than that. And so we started looking at it as a group. All of the city managers were talking about it. We pulled in the judges. Honestly, when Kelly heard it at the Austin trip, I think, Longview Chamber of Commerce took a very hands-on leadership role and called together all of the county leaders from a 14-county region, I think. We had this same room pretty much full, and a group of us got to present. And we said, look, there's a number of negative consequences beyond this just cut of 5% because it doesn't work that way. It did a bunch of other things. And interestingly, now they're saying, oh, if only we had known. Well, you did know. We said it was going to happen. One of the consequences was just what the judge said. It was definitively going to impact our ability to do and be competitive with economic development. Other states are applauding. I mean, they're cheering on our legislature for the changes that they're making that limit cities' abilities to grow. The Texas Miracle was a specific recipe. Look, you don't change out the sugar for salt in your cake and expect to have a delicious cake again, right? You change the recipe, and the recipe here is the cities. The state does very little, very few projects actually involve state money in economic development. What's made Texas such an extraordinary miracle is the cities. Big cities, little cities, all different cities having local control over their own destiny. Communities, because it's not just us. It's what the judge said. Look, you can get rid of him and put somebody else in if you can find someone to be willing to take the job. Same thing with us by way of getting a majority of our council members to believe that we need turned over. So here's the thing. Economic development was one of the things. What I stood on this stage and I said was, This bill literally incentivizes cities and counties who have made good decisions to make bad decisions. Number one, it will force people to take on debt. Judge, how's that parking garage looking like it might be funded?
By debt.
By debt. When I met the judge, that was the thing that my mayor told me. Mayor Spradlin said, he will not use debt. They've used no debt in so long they have no debt. He was so proud of Gregg County's lack of debt and the judge's fiscal constraint and conservative fiscal policies, and here we are. Number two, it forces a couple of really bad things. It forces you to drop the tax rate in a good economy. It forces you, that doesn't sound so bad, right? Yeah, you have more money, drop your tax rate. Fantastic, let's cheer it on. Everybody in Austin thought there'd never be a bad economy. We're never gonna see inflation again, right? We're never gonna see 8% inflation. This was just 4 years ago. Where are we now? We said when it happens, this will happen. It will force us to drop our tax rate in good economies, regardless of inflation, and it would force us to raise the tax rate in bad economies. It's happened. Kilgore's had to go up a number of years in a row. We lost Halliburton, we lost a number of other oil and gas businesses, and we had to raise our tax rate in the worst economies during COVID that we've seen in decades. And then the last thing was this, and most of you, I'm assuming, have something to do with business. Your voice matters less now than it did 4 years ago. Why is that? Because the consequence of going above that 3% cap is that it goes to a referendum. Guess who doesn't get to vote in a referendum? Business owners, unless they live in the community, right? So a bunch of you don't live in the community that your business is located, right? Your voice only matters if you're a homeowner once it comes to these issues and the issues of local services and local tax rates. All of those things have shown out to be true. They've caused problems not just in rural East Texas, but across the entire state. And now we have legislators that are saying, oh, we wish we'd have known. Well, you did. Every one of us told you. The chambers of commerce told you. Business owners told you. And here we are. Every consequence we talked about is coming true. Their response to that is, you know what? We're going to eliminate your ability to talk to each other through professionals and stop you from coming down here and telling us about the consequences because it makes us look bad. That's their solution to this problem now. Sorry. Judge, I think I found your soapbox.
Well, and I want to be clear that when as we were kind of talking through this and determining exactly what we wanted to share, what you all wanted to share, it was not with the intent of complaining. It was just with the intent, like you said, in 2019, of sharing. Just, this is what we're facing. We're going to keep doing our job. We're going to keep providing the services, but it's just, we need to share kind of the road that we're going down. So I'm going to be honest. Rollin, you may remember that we were talking and I sort of played the devil's advocate, and I was like, oh, come on, this doesn't sound that bad. You got other mechanisms, you got other levers, and I want you to talk a little bit about how you respond to that.
So first off, to echo what she said, this is not as much a gripe session as it is your community control, the direction that we take based upon how you direct us and what actions you want to see. That's what's being taken away, because we're always going to play by the rules that the state legislature passes. We're going to do that because that's what we do. That's what we are required to do that with. But it's kind of like, and I like this line that Laura used, it's kind of like a death by 1,000 cuts. And so Longview, for the past, since I've been here, the past 20 years, when they wanted to do a mass project to improve the quality of life, they put it to the voters, and you people in this room said, yes, we want to do that. And so with that approval, we reinvigorated our downtown. What did that reinvigoration of downtown, right? Anybody remember driving on the brick streets that you had to go get the alignment that you talked about? Well, what happened was when you as the community decided we're going to do this and we're going to reinvest in this, we were catching up, right? We had let that infrastructure fall back down. So we reinvested into that, the community, and by we, I mean all of us, because I'm a resident here as well. We all reinvested it, and then what happened? Then the private reinvestment came in because there was a belief and a rejuvenation in what has happened in downtown. What we're telling you is this great vision of the community that you wanted to live in, we're going to get to where the pendulum's going to start swinging back, where when the street's got a pothole in it or the cracked streets have a problem, that we're not going to be able to repair a panel, right? We're going to go fill it with asphalt. Remember the asphalt over the bricks? We still have a few of those in town. That's the vision of what you go in. These park systems that are kind of the crown jewel, in my opinion, in East Texas, all this money we put back into the parks because we wanted that for our children and for our families to come back, and the quality of life events and things that we have within Longview. We've built all this stuff, and where's the maintenance going to come from? Where's the maintenance going to come from? Because primary functions of communities and municipalities, and we'll all sit up here and tell you that, you've got to have a police and fire department, and pretty much beyond that, everything kind of amounts to what the community desires beyond that. And those are the things that are being put in peril. It's like buying a new car. Anybody who's bought a new car lately, something goes wrong with it, you don't have the money to fix it.
And so, Josh, you had a really good illustration when Roland talked about sort of the 1,000 cuts, how y'all have been handling things up till now.
So I had to steal the tool bag from my son and take out his Fisher Price tools and put in some real ones. But yeah, so we talked about this, and this was the gist. We had a number of conversations leading up to this, and what we talked about was this idea that one of the challenges is we've used other tools, right? So here, let's see. They took away a hammer, right? The annexation thing. Roland, they took the hammer away, and so Roland was like, well, look, don't show my dad, but I'm going to use these pliers to hammer that nail, right? We figured out a different way to still be able to sort of manage that growth. They're probably going to take that away too, right? And then this SB2, it was like, all right, well, I could have hit it with a screwdriver, right? But that's gone. And you know what? Just take the wrench and the screwdriver too. And as I go through this thing, it's like, all right, well, that wrench is gone, but I still have a ratchet, right? The thing is, we've been using all of these tools to make sure that y'all don't know. You have GAP. We have Skeeter. Now, Skeeter wasn't happy. They were the first one to find out that what we had initially thought we were going to be able to do wasn't possible anymore. We didn't know as we went into that project. These economic development projects that feed all of your families and provide the employees that come into your businesses, those things are years and years in the planning. They're selecting between us and Missouri and Colorado and California. In our case, Germany. We're literally recruiting companies from Germany. GAP had dozens of choices of where they could be, and they picked Texas. They picked Longview, Texas, for a very good reason. It's years of planning, right? Well, they took tools away in the middle of it. And so the tools, as they keep going, it's like, what do I have left? I've got some earmuffs so that it don't hear you complaining as much, and then we're out of it. Like, there's nothing left. It's just duct tape. And I hate to say this, but it's happening in Kilgore. It's not so far away. We've been extremely successful. I mean, we're so proud of our success. We're so proud of Longview's success, White Oak, GLADEWATER, and all of the things that are happening. But I got to tell you, we cut 20 employees back at the beginning of COVID because of the economic downturn and the lack of flexibility to manage our budget. 18 of them maintain the stuff that Roland's talking about. They're the ones that patch the streets. They're the ones that fix the parks. They're gone. We haven't brought them back. Because on top of that then, you know, what always happens, public safety needed more money. So we gave big raises to make sure that we didn't see the same problems that some other communities are seeing in public safety. Well, that meant that those 18 employees, just so you know, that's like 12, 13% of our workforce was gone overnight. No flexibility left. We're literally left with
Roland
duct tape.
is about to jump off.
I know, I see him.
He's about to jump off of his stool, so I'm going to give him a minute. I'm going to give him a minute.
So the one thing that we talked a lot about, we sound like we're whining about 2019, right? I want to draw your attention. The legislature's in session right now. And whatever they pass, we're going to comply with. But I want to tell you, there are actually bills in the legislature right now that are in committee hearings that are reducing that 3%. They want to cut the appraisals to 2.5%. We're not going to get to 3.5% if you limit it to 2.5%. So it's going to get harder.
All right, that is the perfect segue, and we're going to wrap it up right now. Because to learn about this that Roland just talked about, and to be the voice that we need to be to protect the communities that we want, and maybe we want a community with that super low tax rate and with no parks, and that's okay too. But to be the community, to have our individual liberties, it means that we need to get involved. These guys have told you about what their experience is like. Let's speak from our hearts. And so in order to do that, we have to know what to say. There's QR codes. This is going to be like the only time that somebody up at a podium tells you to actually get out your cell phones, and I'm not going to be offended. So get out your cell phones. There are QR codes on your tables right now. If you can't reach one of those, then you should be able to come up to this big screen or any of the big screens and sign up to get alerts about this, all of these things that are going on that our community leaders are telling us about. And when you do that, I promise Kelly is not going to overwhelm you with information. As y'all know, she is a very direct and to the point person, but she will give you, we've talked a lot about tools today. The chamber will give you the tools to be the advocates that we need to be on behalf of our communities. We will give you the tools, specifically the chamber advocacy team will give you the tools to protect our individual liberties and to ensure that our communities look the way that we want them to look in the future. So we really appreciate you all being here. We are up against our time limit, and so I want to thank you, gentlemen. Judge Stout, of course, I will never stop you from speaking, so go ahead.
Well, thank you all for listening. It's a new way that we're dealing with out there that's going to continue to be a challenge for us, and we'll deal with it and we'll get past it. But we think you needed to know about being involved in your chamber. Thank you.